They told you silver would never run out, that it's just like gold, that when prices go up, the scrap will come pouring in. But they lied. In 2024, the world used 1.2 billion ounces of silver. Only about 140 million came from recycling. That's less than 12%. And dropping fast. You think it's because people are lazy? No. It's because recycling silver is functionally illegal in the West. Banned by law, blocked by banks, priced out by physics, and the truth is so bad, no one dares publish it. This is the shocking investigation they never wanted you to see. 10. The permit trap. Why you can't legally recycle silver. Even if you want to. You might think that with silver trading above $66 an ounce and heading toward triple digits, recycling should be booming. After all, capitalism is supposed to reward opportunity. But here's the cruel joke. Even if you have the money, the machines, and the manpower to recover silver, the government won't let you. The biggest enemy of silver recycling in the West isn't physics or economics. It's paperwork. And that paperwork comes in the form of environmental permits. The EPA, the EU's REACH regulation, and countless state and provincial codes have constructed a legal labyrinth so complex and restrictive that even trying to open a silver recycling plant is career suicide. Let's walk through what it takes to legally recover silver from e-waste or solar panels. First, you have to file for a hazardous waste treatment permit. Why? Because you're using nitric acid, hydrochloric acid, and often cyanide, chemicals that are essential to leach precious metals from circuit boards and solar cells. These permits aren't rubber stamps. They require multi-year environmental impact reports, groundwater modeling, emission studies, fire suppression systems, and public hearings. Yes, public hearings. Your neighbors can show up and protest your application because they don't want to live next to a toxic plant, even if you're saving the environment by preventing mining. Now comes zoning. Most urban zones ban heavy industrial activity. You'll have to find land in a remote industrial park or rezone an existing facility, which can take 5 to 10 years. And even if you do clear that hurdle, your plant will still be treated like a nuclear facility. You'll need continuous air quality monitoring. You'll need triple containment systems for wastewater. You'll need to file monthly EPA reports. Miss one filing or get one bad test result from a waste stream, and your whole operation is shut down. This is not speculation. In California, over 90% of permitted e-waste facilities operate under narrow exemptions, processing only select components with pre-sorted materials. Full-spectrum recycling, where you break down smartphones, solar panels, and medical waste to recover silver, is functionally illegal. Even the few facilities that do operate profitably must outsource their dirtiest steps to unregulated jurisdictions overseas, then import the refined silver back. It's a legal shell game, and it's only getting worse. The West has made it impossible to touch the metal without inviting a lawsuit, a protest, or a SWAT team in hazmat suits. Silver isn't just buried in landfills, it's buried under red tape. 9. The customs curtain, how anti-terror laws block the flow of recycled silver. You've heard of trade wars, you've heard of supply chains, but have you ever heard of silver being classified as a suspicious material? In the post-9/11 world, anti-money laundering laws have transformed global trade in precious metals into a legal minefield. And at the center of this web lies a horrifying truth. If you try to export recycled silver out of the West, or import raw e-waste to recover it, you will be flagged, inspected, and often blocked by customs agents under suspicion of trafficking or terrorism financing. This is the customs curtain, and it is making silver recycling not just hard, but diplomatically toxic. Let's say you want to recover silver from printed circuit boards in Ghana. The boards are already shredded, they're ready for refining, and the material contains significant silver content. You arrange to ship it to your recycling plant in France. You think you're saving the planet. But to customs officials, you're moving high-value, poorly documented waste across borders. That triggers anti-money laundering protocols, hazardous waste flags, and sometimes terrorism red alerts, especially if your counterparty is in a non-OECD country. You may have heard of the Basel Convention, an international treaty designed to stop rich nations from dumping toxic e-waste in poor countries. What nobody tells you is that Basel amendments now prevent the reverse as well. You cannot import recyclable waste from poor countries either. Even if it's valuable, even if it's pre-processed, even if you're the one doing the green thing. If the manifest is off by even 1 gram, your shipment is seized. If your import partner isn't registered in a white-listed recycling database, your shipment is blocked. If your company isn't pre-certified as a low-risk trader, your materials can be held in customs limbo for months, accruing port fees and storage penalties. Now flip the problem. Let's say you recover silver in a U.S. facility, refine it to 99.99%, and want to ship it to a refinery in Switzerland to convert it into industrial powder. Good luck. You'll face dual-use export controls because silver powder is considered a potential ingredient for military-grade nanomaterials. You might need a license from the Commerce Department. You might get investigated by FinCEN for laundering. The act of shipping your own recycled silver becomes a federal case. This isn't conspiracy, it's policy. And it means that silver recycling is not just economically unviable, it's logistically radioactive. 8. The insurance collapse. Why no one will underwrite silver recovery in the West. If you've ever wondered why there are so few private silver recycling plants in North America or Europe, let me give you the answer no consultant will ever publish. Insurance. You can't build a plant without it. You can't run a high-heat furnace, a chemical leaching line, or even a forklift without comprehensive liability coverage. And when it comes to silver recycling, insurers have tapped out. They've done the math. They've seen the lawsuits. And now they won't touch the industry with a 10-foot pole, unless you're a multinational with a $10 billion balance sheet and a personal hotline to the EPA. Let's say you want to open a mid-size silver recycling facility to process 200,000 solar panels a year. You've got $20 million in startup capital. You've passed the permits, cleared the zoning, and even secured government incentives. But when you go to get commercial liability insurance, fire insurance, pollution coverage, and workers' compensation for hazardous materials, no one will write the policy. Why? Because the risk profile of silver recycling is higher than oil refining. You're dealing with explosive gases, carcinogenic acids, heavy metals, and shredded electronics that contain everything from lithium to lead to mercury. One mistake, one spill, one cancer diagnosis from a neighbor 2 blocks away, and you're facing a class action lawsuit that could wipe out your entire company. The insurance industry knows this. After the Agbogbloshie scandal in Ghana, where international e-waste burning caused a public health disaster, global underwriters quietly reclassified informal electronics recycling as a high-risk sector. After fires broke out in Western recycling plants in California in 2020, in the UK in 2019, actuarial tables were updated again. The data now shows that the expected annual claims for e-waste processing facilities are higher than the premiums collected. That's underwriting suicide. So the insurers walked away. Even the few policies that are available come with nuclear caveats. You have to pay a $5 million deductible. You have to install a $1 million scrubber system. You have to accept coverage gaps that exclude pollution, employee health exposure, or chemical fire, which is like selling you a car policy that doesn't cover crashes. Most startups can't survive these terms, so they never get insured, which means they never build, which means the silver never comes back. This is how recycling dies, not with a bang, but with a cancellation notice. 7. The academic firewall. Why university science is working against silver recovery. If you're hoping that some brilliant lab at MIT or Oxford is going to swoop in with a revolutionary new silver recycling technique, let me save you the disappointment. They already did, and it's collecting dust on a shelf, because the modern scientific establishment isn't interested in solving the recycling problem. It's interested in publishing papers. And here lies the academic firewall, one of the least understood, but most powerful barriers to silver recovery in the West. Here's how it works. Every year, PhD students across the globe experiment with novel ways to extract silver from e-waste, catalysts, and solar panels. Plasma arc reactors, enzymatic leaching, supercritical CO2 methods, you name it. On paper, some of these approaches do work, but when you ask, can this scale? Or Is it commercially viable? You hit a brick wall, because the incentives inside the modern academic system have nothing to do with implementation, and everything to do with publication. A university lab will spend 3 years perfecting a recycling method that works on 2 grams of silver in a petri dish. They'll get a paper published in Nature Materials, they'll win a sustainability award, then they'll move on. Why? Because the career reward stops at the footnote. No tenure committee in the world gives you credit for building a dirty recycling plant next to a sewage treatment facility. That's industrial. That's private sector. That's beneath them. Now comes the double whammy: IP strangulation. Most public university research is subject to tech transfer offices. These offices lock down discoveries into exclusive patents that are then priced at astronomical licensing fees. So even if you, a startup founder, want to license a breakthrough acid-free silver leaching method from UC Berkeley, you'll need to pay hundreds of thousands up front just for access. And if your plant fails or gets delayed, you still owe them. This turns scientific knowledge into a hostage situation. Meanwhile, Chinese and Indian labs operate under entirely different rules. They publish less, but they commercialize faster. And they don't worry about OSHA or the EPA. They use industrial solvents that are outright banned in the West. So even if Western academia makes a breakthrough, it is implemented abroad, where the metal is lost to local supply chains. We've outsourced not just the labor of recycling, but the innovation itself. Our smartest minds are too busy chasing peer-reviewed applause to dig silver out of the ground. 6. The military lockbox. How strategic secrecy keeps silver off the market. Most people don't know this, but silver is a military metal. And I'm not just talking about old war nickels or commemorative coins. I'm talking about guidance systems, infrared sensors, advanced drone optics, and even space-based weaponry. Silver isn't just a conductor. It's the most thermally reflective metal on Earth. That makes it essential for satellites, missile domes, radar shielding, and high-altitude aircraft. The kinds of things the Pentagon doesn't like to talk about. Which brings us to the next invisible blockade to recycling: classified stockpiles. Let's say a defense contractor like Raytheon or Lockheed Martin builds a batch of heat-seeking missiles. Each missile contains silver in its seeker head, wiring, and possibly in its low-E glass coatings. Once that missile is launched, the silver is obviously gone. But even if the missile is decommissioned or scrapped, the silver inside it is classified. Why? Because any component of a weapons system that contains proprietary or tactical information is subject to ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. That means it cannot be legally recycled through civilian channels. Now multiply this across every satellite, fighter jet, and military-grade communications device ever built. Tens of millions of ounces of high-purity silver are locked inside classified hardware. Some of it is stored in decommissioned equipment. Some of it has been physically destroyed. But none of it is ever recycled in the traditional market. If it's processed at all, it's done in secure, secretive government facilities, where recovery rates are poor and tracking is opaque. There is no audit. There is no accountability. The silver may be sitting in a bunker at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or buried in a scrap heap in Nevada. But it never returns to the supply chain. Not because it can't, but because releasing it would violate national security protocols. This is what we call the military lockbox. It is a legal black hole where silver enters and never leaves. The government doesn't even list these holdings on their balance sheets. And since military contracts are exempt from public scrutiny, we can't know how much silver is consumed per year. All we know is that it's off the books, off the market, and off limits. You want to recycle? Too bad. The largest stockpile of silver in America might be in a warehouse marked top secret. 5. The fire code. Catch-22. Why building codes? Ban the facilities. Let's shift away from regulation and secrecy and talk about something seemingly mundane: building codes. You might think this is just about fire exits and sprinkler systems. But in the world of silver recycling, the local fire code is one of the most lethal barriers to entry. Why? Because recovering silver, especially from electronics and solar, requires flammable solvents, high-temperature kilns, and large volumes of acidic or corrosive chemicals. And guess what? In almost every city in the Western world, that triggers a building code nightmare. Here's how the fire code Catch-22 works. Suppose you lease a warehouse in an industrial zone. Perfect, right? You want to build a shredding and leaching line to extract silver from e-waste. But as soon as you submit your permit, the fire marshal demands to inspect your chemical storage plan. They find out you're using nitric acid or storing hydrogen peroxide above 30%. Instantly, your building is reclassified as a hazardous material use facility, or H occupancy. What does that mean? You're now legally required to install explosion-proof ventilation, secondary containment, chemical spill zones, automatic suppressant foam systems, and possibly a blast wall. This alone can add $3 to $5 million to the construction cost. But it gets worse. Your landlord may not allow H occupancy. Most commercial leases outright ban hazardous use. You might own the building and still be barred by city code from changing the occupancy class. And even if you clear that hurdle, now the fire department requires you to submit a hazmat response plan. You must train your staff like firefighters. You need PPE, evacuation drills, and full hazmat insurance. The moment you open your doors, you become a 24/7 regulatory target for surprise inspections. If your air monitor ever fails a reading, you can be shut down in hours. This creates a structural bottleneck. The cities where the silver waste is generated, San Jose, New York, London, are too expensive and too strict to host recycling plants. But the rural areas where you might build cheaply don't have the skilled labor, road access, or power infrastructure to run high-volume furnaces. So nothing gets built. The waste piles up in urban centers, while the recycling potential dies in zoning limbo. Welcome to the modern paradox. The places with the silver can't legally recover it. The places that can legally recover it don't have the silver. 4. The waste classification. Scam. How silver becomes untouchable the moment it's used. Here's a trick most people never see because it happens quietly, inside regulatory language that sounds harmless. The moment silver is used in an industrial product in the West, it stops being treated as a metal and starts being treated as waste. Not recyclable material, not recoverable resource, waste. And once silver is legally classified as waste, a completely different set of laws kicks in. Laws that don't exist to recover value. They exist to contain liability. Under US EPA rules and EU waste directives, anything that contains silver and hazardous co-materials automatically falls under hazardous waste codes. Circuit boards? Hazardous. Solar panels? Hazardous. Medical sensors? Hazardous. The silver inside them no longer matters. It is legally invisible. What matters is that the object now triggers cradle-to-grave waste liability. That phrase should scare you, because it means whoever touches that silver next is responsible for it forever. If you recycle a silver-bearing device and 10 years later groundwater contamination is detected near a landfill or processing site, the recycler can still be sued. Even if the recycler followed every rule, even if the contamination came from someone else. This is called retroactive environmental liability, and it is one of the main reasons recycling companies quietly avoid silver-rich waste streams. Now here's the real scam. Mining companies are exempt from this treatment. When silver is in the ground, it is a resource. When silver is refined into bullion, it is a commodity. But once silver is soldered into a device, regulators treat it as toxic trash. The same atom, 3 different legal identities, and only one of them allows free trade. This creates a perverse outcome. It is legally safer to dig new silver out of the earth than to touch silver that already exists above ground. Recycling companies know this. Insurance companies know this. Banks know this. So what happens? The silver stays classified as waste. It gets sealed. It gets buried. It gets incinerated. And no one wants to be the last company on record that handled it. This is not an accident. This is a liability firewall. It keeps silver out of circulation by making ownership legally radioactive. You don't recycle silver in the West because the law doesn't see silver anymore. It only sees risk. 2. The banking blockade. Why silver? recycling is financially blacklisted. You can have the best engineers, the cleanest process, the most advanced recovery technology ever designed. None of it matters if you can't open a bank account. And this is where the silver recycling story gets truly dark. Because in the Western financial system, silver recycling is quietly blacklisted. Banks don't say this publicly. They don't publish it. But internally, silver recycling is categorized alongside industries like chemical waste processing, arms disposal, and hazardous material transport. Why? Because of compliance risk. Anti-money laundering laws, ESG rules, and environmental liability exposure make silver recycling a compliance nightmare. When a recycling startup applies for financing, the bank doesn't just look at profitability, it runs a risk model. Does the company handle hazardous chemicals? Yes. Does it process international waste streams? Yes. Does it deal in high-value metals that can be easily laundered? Yes. Does it face future environmental lawsuits? Almost guaranteed. The result? Automatic rejection. Even worse, banks are terrified of traceability gaps. Recycled silver often comes from mixed waste streams. That means a refinery can't always certify the exact origin of every atom. And in a world obsessed with conflict minerals, that's unacceptable. If a bank finances a company that accidentally processes silver linked to an unapproved source, the fines can be enormous. So the banks take the safest path. They fund mining, not recycling. This is why you see billions flowing into new silver mines, even marginal ones, while recycling firms struggle to raise $10 million. Mining has established frameworks. Recycling has legal ambiguity. And ambiguity is poison to lenders. Here's the kicker. Without bank financing, recycling companies can't scale. Without scale, costs stay high. Without low costs, recycling never becomes competitive. It's a closed loop of suppression. Not by conspiracy, but by risk aversion baked into the financial system. So when analysts tell you, don't worry, recycling will solve the silver shortage, understand what they're really saying. A sector that banks won't finance, insurers won't underwrite, regulators won't permit, and cities won't host, will magically expand. That is not economics. That is fantasy. Silver recycling in the West isn't failing because it doesn't work. It's failing because the financial system has decided it's not allowed to exist. 1. The systemic lock-in. Why recycling silver would collapse the economic narrative. Everything we've discussed so far, the thermodynamic nightmare, the legal traps, the cost curves, the banned chemicals, the insurance gaps, they all point to one conclusion. Recycling silver is structurally impossible in the West. But that's only part of the story. The real reason silver recycling is dead has nothing to do with acid baths or zoning codes. It has everything to do with perception and power. Because if the world admitted that silver is being destroyed and not recovered, the entire financial architecture of commodity pricing, inflation expectations, and green energy projections would collapse overnight. Here's what I mean. The modern global economy runs on narratives, ideas so deeply embedded in policy and planning that no one questions them. One of those ideas is that resources are infinite if priced correctly. Economists call it substitution theory. When a material becomes too expensive, the market finds a cheaper replacement, or recycling fills the gap. It's tidy, it's elegant, and it's wrong. Because silver has no substitute. You can't swap it for copper and solar panels, you can't replace it with aluminum and high-frequency antennas, you can't remove it from ethylene oxide reactors without killing global plastic production. Silver is essential, it's irreplaceable, and it's being lost forever. Now ask yourself, what happens if the world admits that? What happens if a national energy planner in Germany or the US DOE has to revise their solar deployment forecast because the silver doesn't exist? What happens if Apple or Samsung admits that they cannot build next-gen devices at scale without $300 silver? What happens if central banks realize the above-ground stockpile is 90% smaller than they believed? Confidence evaporates, markets panic, the price explodes. But worse, trust in the narrative breaks. Suddenly, the idea that we can build a sustainable future through recycling, innovation, and efficiency starts to look like a lie. And that cannot be allowed. So instead, the illusion must be maintained. Recycling must be shown on every silver supply chart. It must appear as a bar of 200 million ounces per year, even if half of that number is scrap from factory floors or internal refining loops that have nothing to do with post-consumer recovery. This is the systemic lock-in. It's not a mistake. It's a defense mechanism. The system cannot allow silver recycling to be exposed as a failure because it would call into question the very math used to forecast everything from ESG compliance to climate policy to interest rates. Acknowledging the truth would mean repricing every solar bond, every inflation-linked treasury, every supply chain model built on the assumption that recycling is real. So they keep the lie alive. And that's why silver recycling isn't just uneconomical. It's politically suicidal. So now you know. Silver isn't coming back. Not from the landfills. Not from the solar panels. Not from the smartwatches or missile silos. It's burned. It's scattered. It's banned. And yet, the entire system is pricing silver like it's gold. Hoarded, recoverable, safe. But it's not. We're consuming 100 million more ounces than we produce every single year, and the market pretends it's sustainable. If you're holding silver right now, you're not just stacking. You're holding the last known inventory of an element that is being erased from the earth. So the only question left is this. When the world finally wakes up and begs for the metal back, will you sell? And at what price?